Thanks for joining us on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi. On Wednesday, the city of Denver announced that they are banning the use of TikTok on city-owned devices. They're just the latest government entity that's doing this, joining several other cities and even states in banning TikTok. There are growing calls from elected officials on both sides of the political aisle to ban TikTok altogether. But TikTok, a Chinese-owned company that allegedly pulls a lot of your data when you use it, is also the fastest-growing social media platform in both America and across the globe, with over 1 billion worldwide users. But we wanted to separate fact from fiction. Should TikTok be banned, or is this just a bunch of political bluster? We spoke with a Colorado State assistant professor of computer science about what he thinks about TikTok and whether or not you should use it. Professor Samaremi, thank you so much for joining us here on 9 News Plus today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Chris.
I guess the first question that I have for you, Professor Samaremi, I know it's probably the obvious, but it's a bit of an overview one. What is TikTok? Who owns it? How does it work?
All right, so yes, that's the fundamental question. So TikTok is essentially a short video hosting service, a platform that allows you to create and post and share and consume short videos up to 10 minutes long. It is owned by a company called ByteDance. It's a Chinese company with headquarters in Beijing, in China. TikTok was launched into the global version, which is called TikTok, was launched in 2017. But there is a Chinese version of it, which is the same social media, but in Chinese, that was launched in 2016, and that is called Douyin. It's active in China. TikTok right now has about 1.5 billion users worldwide, and in the US alone, it has approximately about 100 million users per month.
So that's quite a bit, and my understanding about that is it's grown quite a bit over the last couple of years, correct?
It is. It is the fastest growing social media, particularly during COVID. It grew significantly. Even in terms of the ad revenues, is one of the fastest growing sort of social media. If you just consider the social media part of the ad revenue, they had, I think the revenue in 2021 was about $3.9 billion from ads. That increased to around $12 billion in 2022, and it is predicted to reach somewhere around $18 billion in 2023, which is a significant increase in advertising revenue.
That's a lot, and that's a big increase, as you mentioned, in a short period of time, perhaps COVID related. How does, and I know there's been a lot of discussion about TikTok's algorithm being specifically targeted and uniquely good at knowing what you as the consumer want. So how does TikTok's algorithm work? And also, do you agree with what I just said, where, again, there's been general notions about its algorithm being exceptionally gifted at picking up on what the consumer wants?
So the algorithms that TikTok is using essentially belong to the generation of algorithms that we call them recommendation systems. We have seen many of these type of algorithms, and we have worked with them across many different platforms: Netflix, YouTube, social media apps such as Instagram, Facebook. Anything that has sort of some feeding and recommendation of content uses this type of algorithms. The way these algorithms work is that they essentially sense and monitor pretty much all of the interactions that the users have inside the algorithm, the videos that the users watch, how much of which video they watch, whether they follow any particular creator, or how many videos of a particular creator the users watch, the likes, the comments that they write, the content of the comments, the frequency of the use, the amount of use, the time of the use of the app. It's being collected. In addition to that, these apps, including TikTok particularly, they collect some data from the device that they are on. Depending on the access that they provide, many of these social media apps, they require quite a bit of access. They can access the location-specific information about the user, the information about the other apps possibly about the user. And these algorithms, they essentially collect all this information, and they learn the user behaviors. That's essentially the objective. And then they try to recommend content to the user that increases the user's engagement. This is really the ultimate objective. These are work like ad machines. So they want to sell ad, they want to sell more targeted ad, and therefore the objective is to increase the engagement of the user by making better recommendations. TikTok algorithms in particular are known to be very effective part of the reason I believe is that they collect so much data, and they collect very nuanced type of data as well. So for instance, it's being said that they collect even data about the sounds in particular videos and whether the users are showing interest toward videos with particular sounds, and that we'll consider in the recommendation. There are also some studies, and a recent study showing that they do have some JavaScript codes that they have been collecting the keystrokes that the users use within the in-app browser. So they have their own browsers, some of these applications, including TikTok, that if you click on a link and you want to go to a website, they don't redirect you to Chrome or Safari on your phone. They have an in-app browser, and it seems that TikTok insert a JavaScript code there that can record the keystrokes of the user within that browser, meaning that if you are typing in your credit card number or your password or anything else within that browser on a website that you're visiting in that browser, apparently there is a code that TikTok has that was collecting. Of course, TikTok commented on this and they confirmed that they collected this data, but they mentioned that they were not using it for the algorithms. But general idea is that it seems that because of the nuanced amount of data and the significant amount of data that they are collecting, the algorithm is known to be very effective in predicting and making quite accurate recommendations.
Is that different, what you mentioned with the algorithm, from, say, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, some of the more mainstream American social media platforms?
In a lot of aspects, no, but in some specific, and I think the sort of attention should be given to those specific aspects, those nuanced data that's been collected, that they are different. So one thing about TikTok, in addition to sort of in-app data that it collects, it also collects a lot of data from the websites that the users visit outside of the app, whether you are a TikTok user or not, whether you have TikTok on your device or not. TikTok is one of the companies, because they're ad sellers, they have some trackers called Pixel that they install on, they have it installed on different websites by the different website owners. This can be completely separate websites. And there is a recent investigation showing that surprisingly a large number of websites in the US, some of the very popular websites, they do have those pixels on the websites that they collect data about the pages you visit on those websites, the content that you see, your IP address, and information of that sort. So they do collect information about that too. And if you are a TikTok user, then those information all together can create a profile. This is something that Google has been doing it too, Meta has been doing it too, but for some nuanced information. I mean, the main information that I mentioned with respect to the in-app browser and recording the keystroke. A study that essentially identified these, tested some other social media apps as well, including Instagram and YouTube, etc. None of those other apps were collecting information about the keystroke, which can include very sensitive information. But it seems that TikTok was the only one that was collecting those. In addition to that, information about the sound, for example, in the video, the only app that I know I have heard this thing about was TikTok, that sort of, it has all these nuances of the content, and they do track the user's interaction with the content with that regard.
So it seems like TikTok may be collecting more information than other apps that we're known for, and it seems like it's pretty predictive in its algorithm and figuring out what the consumer wants. Now, getting to the key question here, is the Chinese government getting that information as far as you know? And if so, are they getting access to all of it? Do we have an idea about how much information they will be getting from us?
So, of course, TikTok claims that they don't share the US users' data with the Chinese government, and they have not shared it before. There's no direct evidence that shows that they have shared this so far, but I think there are legitimate grounds for concern. Part of the reason is not just the TikTok collecting a lot of data. They do seem to collect a lot of data, and a little bit more than maybe the other sort of similar apps. I think the one big concern is that it's a Chinese company, and it is owned by a company with the headquarters in China. China has a long history of collecting data, about showing a lot of interest in data about the foreigners, the citizens of other countries. That includes data that they can collect from other social media that are available on internet, like using Instagram, Twitter, Google search data to collect information about the foreigners and citizens of other countries. They have used private electronic and technology companies to collect data about the foreigners. Therefore, TikTok being owned by a Chinese company with headquarters in China, there is a ground for concern that China will have significant interest in this data. Also, the national security laws in China can compel companies within China with headquarters and sort of offices, branches in China to provide access to their data if requested by the government. And again, it's not clear whether those requests have been made or not, and if they are made, how TikTok can not provide the data to the Chinese government. I think in addition to this, there's another aspect that should be considered, and something that we have experienced in the US, and that's the power of this data for influencing the behavior of the user. So even if it's not a direct access to the sensitive information or national security information, this amount of data, this profile, this complete profile of users and algorithms that can predict so accurately how this user's behavior, what this user would like, how they can manipulate and change the user's behaviors online, they can be used for, if needed, for example, fake news or misinformation campaigns. And we have seen those type of campaigns affecting elections in our country in 2016 and 2020 elections. I mean, the case of Cambridge Analytica, for instance, that happened based on a simple quiz on Facebook, that the data that was collected years ago was used to influence the 2016 election. We have seen misinformation affecting the stock market within US. So it's also the concern that this amount of data, what are the implications of it? And if there is a campaign that this data can help with, can be a very effective misinformation campaign that can disrupt some of the democratic and economic mechanisms of our country.
So that's interesting to me, because I feel like a lot of the concern I've heard about TikTok is, what if the Chinese government is gaining access to our information? You're saying that is part of the concern, but then the other flip side of it, which maybe is a little undersold, is that they can push their narrative or whatever the Chinese want to push onto us as well, right?
Agreed. And China has a history of running these campaigns, the Chinese government, on Twitter, using sort of misinformation or fake accounts, or also access sensitive information. And I believe that is even a more critical concern, given the power of influence that these algorithms have over users. Those 100 million users or more that they are using it within the US, right? They can have a complete profile on the side of the algorithms, and it is not very easy. It is not very difficult to predict, right, the type of behaviors and how they can influence their behaviors.
So, I mean, I know you kind of answered it and you alluded to this already. So you do, I suppose, agree that these growing fears about TikTok are justified based on what you know at this point?
I think there are legitimate grounds for concern. I can say from a personal experience, I have several different social media apps on my device. They use TikTok is intentionally not one of them, mainly because of these security concerns. There are also some recent cases that sort of provide some evidence, of course not complete, but some sort of evidence that are also cause for concern. For instance, Forbes reported about a couple of months ago, and this was based on an internal investigation within TikTok, that some of the employees of TikTok, they were using the data from the app to essentially spy on a few of the Forbes journalists who had reported about the relation between TikTok and the Chinese government, meaning that even some personnel, some employees within the TikTok, and TikTok has quite a bit of people who used to work on the state media, for example, within China, and what the interests of those people are. They seems that they do have access to some of the sensitive information. So all of this, when you bring all of these together, I think there are legitimate grounds for concern.
That's really insightful information. Maybe a bit of advice. So let's say for somebody who loves TikTok and is just really into it and just can't get rid of it, is there anything they can do to protect themselves and limit the amount of information that's given to the company here?
If they're using TikTok, they should know that they are providing a lot of information already. One thing they can do, they can possibly restrict the access of the app. And these apps requires a lot of access, and they have based on because they are installed on particular platforms like iOS platform or the Google platform, they have to request those access. All right. For example, access to the location specific information. When you provide that access, TikTok at any moment can know where you are located. Essentially, at real time, they can locate you. Right, they can see your location information. The access, for example, to the contact information, the information of contact, something that many of these apps they require in order to operate. Right, but you should know that when you provide access to your contact, the TikTok can collect data about your contact, their phone numbers, the email, anything that you are keeping in your about your contacts. They do access, and they can have access to it. So it seems that if you can somehow limit or restrict this access and you still want to use the TikTok, it's the only way that you can restrict sharing some of this information. When you are using websites, for the people who are not using TikTok, but they are going to websites and they are concerned about these pixels and trackers of TikTok sort of monitoring what they are doing, or even the TikTok users when they are sort of using their browsers on their computer and devices, not the TikTok app particularly, to go to other websites. There are some blockers. There are some applications that can block trackers, the social media trackers, that I suggest they install on their browsers. And then at least they limit the amount of information that TikTok and other social media companies can collect about them.
So some really good advice. I guess any final tips, tricks for or information about TikTok that you think the average consumer should know?
I think one general thing about this application is that we have to look at them as essentially algorithms working behind the scene. The feed that they provide is the job of the algorithm. The more we interact, we use these algorithms, the more we have the trace of our behavior about what we like, what we don't like. Right, we are feeding data to the algorithms, and these algorithms, the way they work, the more data you feed them, the better they get, the better they get in recommending, the better they get in knowing us, right, and sort of predicting our behavior. And at the same time, if they can predict our behavior and if they can predict our preferences and what we like and what we do not like, we should know that they can influence us, right? They can provide us with information, right, that can affect our decision in our life. So I think we should be, if we want to continue using apps like TikTok, we have to be cognizant of this matter and how much time we are spending on it, and we are essentially generating data, and we are allowing them to observe us more and know us more.
This is excellent information, Professor. So we really appreciate a few minutes of your time, and thanks for lending us your insight about TikTok and how it not only, again, is something that we're providing a lot of information to, but it could perhaps be influencing us as well. So Hamed Saremi, an assistant professor in computer information systems at Colorado State University, thanks so much for taking the time to lend us your expertise about TikTok here today.
Oh, of course, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.